This is the procedure for mounting the vertical shaft and related parts. The vertical shaft must be mounted before the horizontal shaft. If the horizontal shaft is mounted first, the angular bearing case of the vertical shaft will be placed in contact with the spiral gear, preventing assembly of the vertical shaft. Mount the lower spring. Set the steel ball on the spring seat to mount it. To mount the vertical shaft, align the keys mounted on the lower bearing case of the vertical shaft with a key groove on the lower bearing housing. With the vertical shaft free, mount the horizontal shaft. Apply grease to the lip of the oil seal mounted on the small bearing housing, taking care not to damage it, and mount the horizontal shaft. Align the keys of the upper bearing case with the key grooves on the upper bearing sleeve to mount the horizontal shaft. Check that the upper bearing housing is firmly mounted. Mount spacers on the upper bearing case, then mount the upper bearing case, taking care to align the flat springs correctly top and bottom. Measure the gap between the upper bearing housing and flat springs. The tolerance for this gap vary according to the model, so please consult your user's manual. If the measured gap is not within the tolerance, select the appropriate spacers and insert them to ensure that the gap is within the tolerance. Two types of spacers are supplied, 0.5 millimeters and 1.0 millimeter. Check that the gap between the upper bearing housing and flat spring is within the tolerance, then temporarily remove the upper bearing housing and set the O-ring. Apply grease to the O-ring groove before setting the O-ring. This prevents the O-ring from falling out. Align the keys mounted on the upper bearing case with the key groove on the upper bearing sleeve. At the same time, align the retaining bolts of the upper bearing housing. Insert spacers on the upper bearing case to the appropriate thickness, then set the flat spring. Mount the O-ring on the upper bearing housing, then mount upper bearing cap 2 and the upper bearing cover. Tighten the 3 bolts uniformly to fasten. Mount upper bearing cap 1, then mount the mist cover.